In today's world, it's more and more valuable to get along, even when you can't see eye to eye. Those who can get along end up forging partnerships, building teams, and ultimately live happier and healthier lives. But what is it that makes these people get their way with seemingly effortless appeal? How do they persuade and influence without forcing themselves down people's throats? If you want to become a magnate of communication and influence, there's something critical you must understand about the art of communication. We tend to think that the best communicators are the ones with the best ideas. So we look at these rare personality types and just consider them rare social geniuses, and we can tend to live our lives frustrated that we will never become them and no one will ever see our point of view. But genius is rarely the quality that you see these people lead with. In fact, instead of talking about themselves and their ideas, you see them do a great deal more listening. Oh, sure, I know how to listen, you say. But the real question is, do you know how to speak in a way that allows others to listen? In this module, we will show you the art of asking questions and how you can become more influential and build better relationships when you rephrase your ideas as questions. We'll start with a simple example. Picture the gray box on the screen as your listener. You're trying to give them information that you think will help them, but for them to be open to receive it, they have to believe that you have their best interest in mind, that you care more about them than the advice and the ideas you're seeking to share. When we forget this, we can be perceived like we're telling someone what to do, and nobody is going to listen to that. When we tell people before we earn their trust, we'll make people defensive and we will block communication. This brings us to a key point about communication. If we want to influence, we have to build trust first. So instead of sharing your ideas, questions can be a gentler approach. When we ask questions, we embody a spirit of curiosity that invites others to do the same. By taking an interest in our listener, we show them that we care, and they're more likely to trust what we have to say. Taking the approach of asking questions doesn't mean you abandon your point of view. In fact, we find that the more we probe with questions and pick and probe around the ideas we want to share, the more receptive our listener is to do the same and to really contemplate what we have to say. Overall, questions build trust. Our first priority in a conversation is to build this container of trust, which we call safety. And when we communicate with people in a way that makes them feel safe, they are more open-minded and receptive, so we can all benefit. By the end of this module, you will have several clarifying questions at your disposal to do just this. We will cover several approaches to support asking these clarifying questions, and we'll give you tangible examples that can help you turn frustrating situations into situations of clarity. When things seem to stall or get stuck, rely on these questions to help move the conversation forward. But before we do that, we need to dive into the underlying concepts behind how dysfunctional communication happens. Think about what you do when you sense someone isn't listening. Perhaps you see them arguing. Or maybe they're just silent and unresponsive, not engaging with what you have to say. There could be many reasons why someone isn't engaging, so don't take it personally. Often, it has little to do with what you're saying and a lot more to do with how you're saying it. Let's explore an example of a conversation where both sides don't feel listened to. Pretend you're trying every which way to explain your point of view, but no matter what, it feels like the other person is closed off to what you're saying. What's even worse is that the other person feels the same way. So how can we expect to get anywhere when both sides feel like they can't be heard? What are we missing? So what's happening is both sides have important points to make. Both feel right about their points, and sometimes both are. However, both people are operating with the false assumption that being right about their point means proving the other person wrong. In reality, having the right answer is only a small part of what needs to happen in a conversation. It's about influence, and influence is much more than being right about something. Having the answer, if you're trying to convince someone, is a starting point, But it's a lot different than getting them to change their behavior and shift their mindset as a result of your information. So no matter what we put forward in an argument, in the end it doesn't matter. If we really want to influence, we have to be willing to connect with someone deeper than just the information. When you find someone digging in their heels, resorting to silence, usually it's not because what you're saying is wrong. It has to do with fear. To nudge someone along their journey, you have to locate and speak directly to someone's fear. Let's explore another story. There was once a room full of executives. They were at a crossroads because their annual report had shed light on some bad news. If they couldn't meet their profitability goals by the end of the year, they were going to have to sell the business. The chief executive stood up and asked, "What's the real problem here?" Everyone's hands went up and the room hummed with noise. She waved her hand to silence the noise and asked again, "What's the real problem here?" There was a moment of pause this time. A moment where everyone thought a little deeper before filling the dead air with noise again. And as the room hummed, the chief frowned and sat back down, and everyone fell silent. She stared at her desk for a long time, and slowly gazed to the center of the table and placed her question in the middle of the room. What's the real problem here? Everyone sunk into their chair deep in thought. This story illustrates the power of a question and how it gave permission for the people in the room to think a little deeper and explore paths they hadn't gone down yet. Each time she asked her question, she was telling people it was safer to explore a little deeper. Opening a space of exploration with people is the basis of safety. When we approach conversations with this spirit of curiosity, a willingness to see more perspectives, we create the safe space for everyone to do the same. So questions aren't just for situations where you're not being listened to. They're also great for situations when nobody is speaking up and when we need to open up the space and make it safe for people to engage. So here are a few approaches to these space opening questions. First, we'll talk about the direct probe. Now, this is useful after someone says something that we're not quite sure what they mean. You can use this to politely probe for more context around what they're saying. Another great approach is the playback question. We can use it when we want to show someone that we're listening by summarizing what they said and bring out the important parts to nudge them in a direction we think is useful to the conversation. The last approach we'll discuss is the leading question. And when we're finally ready to share our own ideas, instead of just throwing out our pearls to the wolves, we can often get better headway with our ideas when they are presented as suggestions. So these 3 questions are the ammunition in your arsenal. Next time you enter a room that is empty with silence or crowded with dissent, try throwing one of these questions into the center and see what happens. When you engage curiosity into the conversation, you'll feel more options, more understanding open up. What felt like resistance will transform into willingness as you work together to build a shared understanding in the room. We'll start with the most confrontational of the questions, the direct probe, useful for when you need to confront something about something you don't think is correct. In these situations, the worst thing we can do is argue the details with them. This will just create more frustration and less options. Instead, ask them to reveal more, and often you'll get better answers. This can be as simple as taking a step back and asking, "Why is that important?" Or simply listen and patiently ask, "And what else?" Both of these questions will take the conversation deeper. Both of these questions invite someone to reveal themselves more fully. Next, we'll talk about the playback question. Let's face it, when we work with new people and bring people from different backgrounds together, we're going to run into translation issues. How do we all get on the same page? If you've been in these situations where there's confusion and noise, you know it's tempting to try and sort out the confusion. And often we try to speak over the volume, and the result is just a wall of noise. So the next time you feel the need to burst through the noise, think about how to center it instead with a question. You can do this by asking, "It sounds like you're saying this. Is that right?" Or, "I hear what you're saying. Is that important because of this reason?" The playback question prompts someone for their summary, signaling to them the important parts of what they had to say that move the conversation forward. Finally, there comes a time when we're done asking questions and we want to have our own suggestions heard. With a leading question, you get to summarize the input on the table before you put out your idea, signaling to everyone that their suggestions up to this point won't be lost on you. For example, "I heard you mention this as your goal. So what if we explored a few alternatives that would also achieve this goal?" This way, you signal that you are listening to them and you're working in their best interest, that their desires are not lost on you, and these alternatives that you've thought of might actually help them get what they want better. Here's another version of the leading question. It works by floating an idea, but asking others to identify its benefits. Take a moment to reflect on these three types of questions and where in your life they could make a difference in how you communicate. There are hidden messages in what we say. And when we ask questions, we invite the listener into a space that allows us to disarm resistance and cut through complexity in the types of conversations we need to have good relationships. A good question can make all the difference. And it can make it safe for people to bring their best thinking and most genius ideas to the table. As you practice it, you'll notice people more and more willing to explore with you as we work together to build a shared understanding that is better than the whole.